welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new episode of your weekday programme, The Daily Debate, here on Now TV International. For tonight, I'm your host, Nancy Sarah Barakat. Up for discussion, we're taking a look at the recent economic reform measures that were set by the government, topped by the liberalisation of the Egyptian pound. In a surprise move on Monday morning, the Central Bank of Egypt announced it had liberalised the Egyptian pound against all foreign currencies. The bank said in a statement that the decision came in order to quell any distortions in the domestic foreign currency market. Following the decision, Minister of Finance Ahmed Al-Garhi said that having two exchange rates, an official rate and a rate on the parallel market, had hindered direct investment into the country. The decision was hailed by a number of global investment institutions like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, as well as the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Now, the decision was also welcomed by Parliament's majority bloc, Da'ma Misr, or Support Egypt, which announced that it fully supports the government's new IMF-inspired economic reforms. Other reforms that took place over the weekend included an increase in the amount allocated to individuals holding food subsidy cards from 18 to 21 Egyptian pounds as of next month, as well as the reduction of fuel subsidies. For his part, the Prime Minister Sharif Ismail held a press conference to clarify the government's recent measures. Ismail said that Egypt did not have the luxury of postponing these urgent reforms and described Thursday as an historic day. He added that all the economic reforms taken as part of the 100% Egyptian program. How do my guests evaluate the recent measures taken by the government? How do they view the timing of such decisions? Do they believe that some of these decisions came a bit late? That and much more will be discussed during today's daily debate. But as always, we like to shed more light on topics making headlines here in the country. And let's start off with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who presided over a meeting with the Prime Minister and the Central Bank Governor, in addition to the Ministers of Defence, Interior, Foreign Affairs, Finance and Supplies today. The meeting was also attended by heads of the General Intelligence and head of the Audit Authority. Presidential spokesman Ala Yusuf said that the meeting tackled a number of issues, including the efforts exerted by the administrative authorities in the field of combating corruption. Yusuf added that the meeting tackled the economic measures that were recently taken to boost the investment atmosphere in Egypt. Now, to tell us more, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, Secretary General of the Arab Investors Union, joins us over the phone. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
How do you evaluate the President meeting with the Premier as well as other officials today, and what does that entail?
I read it clearly that Egypt is going to cover all the dimensions of its economic reform. Financially, the budget reform, of course, subsidies, value-add tax, and this type of decisions in order to diminish the budget deficit.
Right.
On the other hand, banking system and evaluation or re-evaluation of the Egyptian pound in order to bring it to the real price coming according to the demand and the supply.
Right. Do you think also that the meeting tackled in a way, one way or another, the people and how they would react, or how they have rather reacted to these measures?
Many people understand what the government is doing.
Right.
Some people would say, why do we do all of this one of a sudden? Why don't we go gradually? This is not appropriate, because you cannot take one step in the financial dimension without the similar step on the monetary dimension.
Right.
So the third is how to make all the results of these decisions less effect on the needy classes and the poor people.
Right.
That's why the government is taking care of giving more opportunities to the poor classes and to control the prices, not to jump more than the dollar was evaluated lately.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I thank you very much, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, Secretary General of the Arab Investors Union. Ladies and gentlemen, our second top story for this evening. The military raided 3 major armed terrorist hotspots in northern Sinai, killing 11 militants. Army spokesman said that the army had tightened the siege on other militant hotspots in northern Sinai's Al-Arish and Sheikh Zuwaid, seizing arms, wireless communication devices, computers, as well as cameras. The spokesman added that the army's operation against the insurgency has reached a critical stage in uprooting terrorism. The statement added that 28 explosives were located in the Al-Arish and Rafah areas and that 29 other explosive devices had been planted to target security forces were defused. Earlier on Friday, an army brigadier general was shot dead in the Al-Arish area. Before we welcome my guests here in the studio, let's take a look at our first report for the evening and a closer look at some of the recent measures taken by the government, and then we'll be back to start our discussion.
The Central Bank of Egypt on Thursday liberalized the exchange rate of the pound, setting its value based on supply and demand mechanisms. It also gave the banks the freedom to set the value of the local currency against the dollar based on interbank exchange rate mechanism. The CBE Governor Tariq Amir held a meeting with the heads of the Egyptian banks to discuss the measures concomitant the decisions of the CBE. Amir said also that the Egyptian banks are the only entities responsible for setting the proper exchange rate of the pound against the dollar. He also referred that there are no restraints imposed on the transfers of the foreign funds for both individuals and corporations. He stated that global investment institutions welcomed the reformatory measures taken by the Egyptian government, and some of these institutions have contacted the Egyptian government to discuss the possibility of pumping investment into Egypt. In addition, he explained that Egypt faced the exchange rate problem bravely and refused the continuation of 2 markets for exchange rate. Amir continued saying that the banks should have the proper competences to reclaim the foreign currency from the market. He also revealed that the Egyptian banks' foreign currency stockpiles increased 8-fold following CBE's decision. Meanwhile, the parliament's majority bloc Support Egypt announced in a statement that it fully supports the government's new IMF-inspired economic reforms, primarily floating the pound and increasing fuel prices. The statement read that these reforms were inevitable and should be the beginning of comprehensive economic reform. According to the statement, freeing the exchange rate of the Egyptian pounds and cutting down fuel subsidies should improve the country's public finances, counter ineffective bureaucracy, and create a more favorable investment climate. Moreover, the International Monetary Fund praised Egypt's decision as a move to strengthen its competitiveness and help to attract foreign investment. The head of the IMF mission to Egypt, Chris Jarvis, said that the move will lead to the promotion of growth and job creation. The World Bank also welcomed the economic reforms, saying they would create jobs and promote social inclusion. A World Bank statement read that the government's economic reform package would boost the competitiveness of Egyptian businesses, support export growth, attract new foreign investment, free public resources for priority growth and social programs, and support incomes for the poor and the vulnerable. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development also welcomed the decision, saying it is a positive step that will help the country's competitiveness and ease the pressure on its foreign exchange reserves.
Egypt's culture has thousands of years of recorded history. In every major city, you'll find traditions that remain from the time of the pharaohs. Cruising on the Nile, Ramadan in Egypt, Eid, and also shopping. All have a different flavor. Explore Egypt on Nile TV.
ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to welcome here in the studio Engineer Medحت إسطيفانوس, member of the General Federation of Egyptian Industries. Thank you very much for coming in tonight. And also Dr. Alaa Shazli, Professor of Economics at Cairo University. Always a pleasure having you with us. Dr. Alaa, let me start off with you and obviously how you evaluate the situation when it came to Egypt liberalizing the pound.
I think this is a corrective measure that the market participants were waiting for. It took some time for the central bank to announce this adjustment in the foreign exchange regime. It was, as I said, we were waiting for this correction because there were two exchange rates going on the market, the official one and the parallel market rate. And this, of course, had its negative impact on attracting foreign investment and investment decisions, even domestically, because people are waiting whether this is the correct exchange rate price for the Egyptian pound, or there will be adjustment sooner by the central bank. And people were following the policy of wait and see, the investors. So this corrective measure helped to utilize or make use of the resources available in the hand of holders of foreign exchange. The banking system can now get hold of these resources to finance investment or to finance foreign trade. And I see it a corrective measure. That took some time. We were expecting it a bit before that, but eventually it happened, and late better than never.
Right, well, let me ask Mr. Medحت how he sees it. How did you see this particular move by the government, and perhaps also the timing?
I will take it from the business perspective. In fact, we suffered as a business community, we suffered a lot from having two prices for the hard currency. In fact, it was late. Last devaluation happened in 2006, and since then there was no correction. So there was accumulated, let's say, false evaluation for the pound regarding the dollar for 10 years. And unfortunately, we went through a very difficult period, which is from 2011 till now, without getting the right action in time. So that's what makes it difficult. However, it has no option. I mean, it has to be happen. Of course, it will have an impact on the business for the startup of this dramatic change. But we hope that it will not take long to mitigate it and adjust it with the market. That's it.
As for the timing, do you think that there was some significance to the timing of taking such a step?
As I told you, it was late, but we cannot be more late than this.
Right.
I mean, it was crucial to take it now.
Right. If I ask Dr. Alaa the same question, was it a matter of let's just do it now, or was there any other, do you think, consideration that was taken by the government to take the decision on Thursday?
We understand that there were negotiations between the IMF and the government of Egypt.
Right.
And one of the issues or points tackled was the exchange rate policy.
Right.
At the time the negotiations started, the exchange rate in the parallel market was lower than when eventually the liberalization of the exchange rate took place. So the government was trying, of course, to lessen the expected impact, negative impact of liberalization in terms of increase in prices, because most our import bill is significant. It's not trivial, and there is an imported component, much of what we see in our domestic markets. So this would reflect, as we understand, on the price level.
Right.
And the government was trying to seek a compromise, but it seems that the deviation of the parallel market from the official rate was going on and became wider difference. So eventually they have to correct for that. As I
Thursday, it was set at the exchange rate was set at 13.5, yes. As I understand. Today it stands at 16. Now people are starting to worry. Should we expect to see a further increase in the price of the dollar, and will it then be left to float according to supply and demand, or will there be a cap that is placed? How is it going to be dealt with?
Okay, because the decision was postponed for some time, when you correct for it, you expect to be kind of overshooting in the shorter term.
Right.
To correct for all these delays and to be able to pool these the available foreign currencies in the hand of the market participants back into the banking system, the official banking system. So the rate has to be appealing to the holders of foreign exchange, and not to give a new chance for a parallel market to be created again, right. If the liberalization is partial or is not real.
So would you say that this measure has actually put an end to the parallel market?
It is helping to put an end to it. It is helping by being more realistic exchange rate price, the price of the Egyptian international value of the Egyptian pound. Being realistic, this helps to have one market for foreign currency.
Right.
This is very important for foreign investment, for even for the domestic market investors in the domestic market, for their investment decisions, for their financing decisions, for foreign trade transactions, for all traders, I mean investors, and this is extremely important. You can't escape having one price for the exchange rate, and this is happening now. So what we see is in my opinion, is some overshooting.
Right.
It might not be the eventual longer run rate. Maybe it will go down. Maybe it will fluctuate afterwards, depending on supply and demand.
Can you give a timeline?
It's difficult to say.
Right.
It's difficult to put, but it might take 1 week, it might take 2 weeks, towards the end of the month. Eventually the market will adjust.
Right.
Okay, depending on the supply and demand forces. And as I said, because there was postponement in taking the decision, so there's a kind of lags behind in the adjustment process in the market. If the people or holders of foreign currency adjust quickly to the changing policy, this means that if there is short-run overshooting, it wouldn't take long. And then we can see maybe in 1 week or so the rate coming back to a lower and still realistic level that reflects supply and demand, the real supply and demand forces.
Right. Well, let me put the same question to Engineer Mithat and ask you how you see the price of the dollar now. It shot up, obviously, from 13.5 to 16 today, or even 16.5, I think, at closing. Do you expect the increase to continue? And again, when do you expect the fluctuations to stop?
Yes, in fact, this question, the right person to answer is the bankers, and I have seen some respected bankers saying that this could take up to 6 weeks.
Right.
We went through this exercise 15 years ago almost, or 12 years ago, when we liberalized partially the Egyptian pound, and it took some like 3-4 months, and it flight to the sky at that time, went up to 7.5 pounds and then back to 5.2. So this is a mechanism, let's say, the normal mechanism to happen. In fact, the professionals also evaluate the pound at a level of, or the dollar at a level of between 11 to 12 pounds.
Right.
This is, let's say, the calculated fair value for the dollar. it could take these 6 weeks, maybe longer or shorter. It depends on the availability, because it is not just enough to liberalize the pound. It's also how we will be able to make it available, to make the dollar available, or the hard currency.
Right.
However, from my point of view, I would say that there are some other decisions should have been taken parallel to the liberalization, which is controlling the local currency cash in the market. Having the availability of a huge amount of local currency cash in the hands of the mediators encourage them to play with the black market, even if it is not with such a huge difference as recently, but even for £1 or £0.5 or whatever, it makes a lot of money. So the central bank should have take a measure to control the cash in the hands of people and to let's say put it in the right channel. And there are some easy things to be done, and it has been done before in 50 years ago or whatever, changing the currency, changing the Egyptian pound, at least for the 50, 100, 200 pounds, and make a grace period to change it from the banks. This will collect all the cash out of the official channels to the banks. And then when it comes back to the market, it has to come with restrictions. I mean, there is no need for someone to go to the bank and ask for £500,000 or without knowing where this money will go.
Right.
It has to go from bank to bank. It is not normal in the, let's say, matured countries to have such amount of money in hands. There is no sense.
Right.
And it's opened the door for the black market to play in different things, not only in the hard
Do you
currency.
think that liberalizing the Egyptian pound will put an end to the parallel market, or the black market as some call it?
Alone, no.
Right. Why so?
As I told you, there are some other actions should be taken in order to do that.
Well, let me ask Dr. Ali his opinion as to your suggestion that people should perhaps change that the central bank should have taken, for example, the step to change the Egyptian currency and ask people to bring in there. Would that have made a difference?
I don't think this will be helpful. Usually the central bank can influence the cash through its monetary policy actions or decisions. For example, through interest rate manipulation, changing the interest rate and so on, will encourage people to shift from cash to save this as bank deposits, for example, as we saw already by raising the interest rate to between 16 and 20% on some bank deposits. This will help to reduce cash in circulation.
Right. Let me ask you, I mean, the main reason why we were told that this decision was taken was to increase foreign investment in Egypt and to encourage investors to come and invest in the country. Do you believe that this is enough?
No, but it is important.
Right.
It's not enough, of course, because there are also legislative system that investors look at, property rights, competition, market competition policy, and all of this stuff are very important to international investors. The exchange rate and having one price is extremely important as well issue, and the government worked on that. Parallel to that, we've seen the government sending signals about the investment policy, foreign investment, how to attract the facilities, the incentives it's making to international investors, and also, of course, to local investors. So the government is working on more than one ground at the same time, whether for the investment policy and the investment in business environment, for the exchange market and financial prices in the market. All these efforts should help attract investment funds, should help create jobs, new jobs, will to reduce poverty and all of what we are looking for as Egyptians after the political uncertainty and turmoil that Egypt passed through in the last few years.
Right.
So I think the government is taking good steps, good decisions towards that end.
Right. Now, if I ask, before I move to how this has affected the average Egyptian, this particular decision, I want to also ask Engineer Midhad about how this is going to affect foreign investments in Egypt, and is it enough on its own, or do we really need to look at the other hindrances to foreign investment that still exist?
Of course, it will encourage the foreign, especially the direct foreign investment to come, as now having one value for the Egyptian pound. However, it is not enough for all types of investment.
Right.
In fact, we did not ask ourselves why the small and moderate businesses is not, let's say, promoted as foreign investment in Egypt. It's simply because there is an official economy whom they are focusing on this type of let's say, businesses. And then the competition is unfair. If we work enough on merging between the unofficial and the official economy together through this type of decision which I have mentioned before, this will encourage also the small businesses and or small investors and the small, and this is the investment where there is a big number of jobs will be created. It is not the giant investment, and the giant investment never stop, because this is it's another era, it's another level of visibility, and if there is a value added from being here, whatever the circumstances is, they will come and they will invest.
Right.
So this is what the government should look at carefully and try to find the right regulation to be settled in order to attract this type of investment. And this is a type of investment which also encourage the local investors to go through and to invest.
All right. If you'll allow me, gentlemen, to take our second report for the evening and a closer look at the conference that Prime Minister Sharif Ismail held following the economic reform announcements. Let's take a look.
Prime Minister Sharif Ismail said on Friday that Egypt did not have the luxury of postponing urgent economic reforms, speaking a day after the country liberalized its currency and increased the prices of subsidized fuel. Ismail said at a press conference that these decisions are Egypt's fate and we have to move forward and the Egyptian economy has to improve. Ismail described Thursday as a historic day, adding that all the economic reforms taken are part of a 100% Egyptian program. The reforms are part of a move to get the International Monetary Fund Board's approval for a $12 billion loan package to be delivered over 3 years. Ismail said the economic program aims to decrease the budget deficit, which currently stands at 12.2% of GDP, to less than 10%. The economic reform program, according to the Prime Minister, will aim to increase taxes and reduce state subsidies. He also said that the majority of the state budget was being exhausted on subsidies, leaving only 200 billion Egyptian pounds to be spent on health, education and other services. The Premier continued saying that the price of metro tickets is too low to continue normal operations. He stated that the metro's revenues do not cover operational costs, adding that if the situation continues as is, the same service will not be offered. In August, President Fattah al-Sisi said that a one-way metro ticket for any distance costs 1 Egyptian pound, even though the real cost is more than 10 Egyptian pounds, adding that the last price increase was 12 years ago. Egypt has repeatedly said it would raise the price of metro tickets to offset annual losses, but has not yet followed through.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Ala, if I come back to you, obviously one of the points that the Prime Minister mentioned during his conference was that these economic reforms or this particular move was 100% Egyptian. Now, a lot of people, he had to clarify that because a lot of people felt that the IMF or an IMF loan of $12 billion obviously comes with so-called austerity measures. Now, does that put things, or does that clarify the matter 100%? And should we expect other measures to be taken in the foreseeable future in order for Egypt to get the $12 billion that it wants from the fund?
Okay, the Egyptian government had a clear idea what to do.
Right.
The negotiations with the IMF, how fast the reform, the pace of the reform will be, how realistic or committed the Egyptian government to the reform. And these were the type of issues that negotiations would go through. And it took some time, the government of Egypt and the IMF to come to an agreement that, for example, on the exchange rate, on the subsidy, how the reduction in the subsidy program will be looking like. For example, we saw the increase in petrol prices, gas prices, I mean. And that is again a corrective measure for distortion in pricing government services, and it is having its impact on the state budget.
Right.
Of course, you want to reduce this budget deficit because this means that the money creation that has to be created to finance these budgets would be again reduced, and that would offset the expected increase in, at least partially, the expected increase in price level because of the liberalization of the exchange rate. So all policies are coming to help each other, that these reform programs are meaningful, and they would be putting the Egyptian economy on the right track, back on the right track.
One of the obviously the decisions that followed was the increase in fuel prices. Now, a lot of some analysts say this isn't the lifting of subsidies, this is a direct consequence of floating the Egyptian pound. What exactly happened there?
No, you have a distortion, you are underpricing, again, like what happened in the exchange market, foreign exchange market. There was unrealistic exchange rate regime going on, and you had to correct for it eventually. Something similar happening. The pricing of fuel is not at the international level, and so the state budget is the state budget or the government budget is bearing the cost of this extra cost, and it's having its impact on the budget results. And you have to go again to the banking system to finance this deficit, which means money creation, more cash in circulation, without being met by real output, whether in goods or services. So it's a problem that has to be tackled on both grounds.
And this also means obviously an increase in the prices of other commodities, does it not?
Exactly.
Okay, well then, people are concerned, obviously, by what is to come and what they should expect in the coming period. The government has started, obviously, a campaign that we see on television saying that subsidy cards will be taken away from those they see unfit to have them, and that they would be given and redistributed, if you will. How important will this move be and protecting the low-income brackets?
Of course, the social safety nets have to be in place because this will reduce the negative repercussions from the expected increase in prices with these reforms on the less privileged sector in society. For the more able people, more financially able people, I think the government has announced before that they have to bear some of the cost of these reforms for the longer term good of the economy, and this is only temporarily on the hope that after these price adjustments with fair pricing system going on in the market, whether for services or for government or private providers of goods and services, then we have a more balanced market condition, more realistic, and that would keep the economy on a sustainable growth pattern. Instead of having these stop-and-go policies when we have the opportunities to expand, for example, in our system, the economy can live for some time looking good, okay, but eventually we have to correct and pay heavy price for that. So instead of having these patterns of stopping and going, and so on, we would like to have a sustainable growth pattern. And for that, you have to set the price system correctly. Of course, there are other things, as we mentioned before, in the legislative system and the competition policy, labor market conditions. All this should be taken as a full-fledged effort by the government to put the economy back on the right track, or to create the good business environment to attract both local and foreign investors.
Right. Let me ask Engineer Mudhat a similar question, perhaps. How important is it that the government protects the low-income brackets? Because we also saw that the government announced that it would increase the amount allocated to individuals holding food subsidy cards from £18 to £21 starting next month. Do you think that such a decision would calm people down and allay their fears to some extent?
It's the common conflict between the what and how. The subsidy is essential for our case as a country. The debate always about how. And for a long time, the way of supplying people with the subsidization was almost one way across the board, as they said. I don't think that this is practical, and because there is lack of database, I think the government was taking the easy way to do it that way. Now, I think by focusing on the issue and by putting the economy on the right track with whatever difficulties we are going to face, and the pressure will come on the low-income people or whatever, some specific programs should be there, and the main should be giving the subsidization in cash. First of all, this will give the chance for the low-income people to, first of all, to feel the cash, to decide by their own where they can direct this cash, not to become just by obligation. You have to take this, and this is what's subsidized. So, and it's different from a segment to another. So this is what they should do in this direction. On the other hand, we should not look at the cost increase or the price increase as always a negative issue. Sometimes it's an catalyst or activating the economy and creating opportunities.
Oh, it's a difficult thing to try and convince someone.
No, just it has to be linked with the level of income for people.
Right.
How to link between the price increase and the income increase. So this can, let's say, neutralize the effect of the regime, the economy. On the other hand, focusing on industrial sector, agricultural sector, all these productive sectors has to be the first priority for the government, because this is where they can create jobs for people to work. This is where they can produce more in order to import and, let's say, balance the budget deficit. And this is the only way to do it.
Right.
I mean, we should not just look for subsidization programs and live with it like what we used to do for 50 years.
Are you for lifting the subsidization program altogether? Because some people would say that it's a huge burden on Egypt.
This has to be in parallel.
Right.
The more you can, let's say, improve the economic performance, the economy performance, and the budget deficit is decreasing, the more you can focus on subsidization for lower income and make their life much better.
Okay. Well, what about the middle class? I mean, a lot of people are saying everybody's focused on, you know, the whole restructuring of the system where you take more from the wealthy and give to the poor and sort of try and do it that way. But then the middle class gets crushed in the process. How can the government make it, I mean, in one way or another, less painful for that bracket?
They will not be able to make it, but the people have to change their habits, their consumption habits.
Well, could you expand on that? Because people always say, you know, we're being crushed in the midst of this. We, as a middle-income family, you know, you've got a working mother, a working father, they've got children in schools, some of them go to private schools, and they're not being looked at.
True, they don't qualify for the social safety networks that the government is establishing to protect against the expected increase in prices and so on. And they also don't have the large incomes by the wealthiest sector in the economy. So they are in between, as you mentioned, and the only way is that they have to bear some, again, of the reform program. But I think it will fall heavier on the middle class, and they have to accept that they are doing this. As I said, it's not going to be permanent. They are not going to suffer for a very long time, but maybe they have to bear this at this stage for some time, hoping that they will be compensated in a better living standards sooner rather than later.
Right.
With this positive attitude, if we may say, then they can change some of their consumption habits. They can consume or smooth their consumption over a longer period of time to reduce the expected negative impact on their expenditure patterns.
Right. Should we expect more reforms in the foreseeable future, especially as Egypt wants an IMF loan?
I think the government has already taken the larger part of it.
Right.
Whatever may come later on would be just complementary to these main decisions that were taken over the weekend.
Right.
So I think that's it.
And what would you say, or how effective will this IMF loan be on the economy? And again, some analysts argue that again it's going to further help show that Egypt is a country that can take decisions and that can attract more foreign investors.
Of course, this is the most important issue now. What the IMF will give the government of Egypt is to finance its balance of payment imbalances and so on. And 12 to 16 billion, what we were hearing that Egypt can be able to raise from these reform programs. But that's not going to live with us for long. So they have to, at the same time or parallel to that, be able to attract foreign investment and motivate even here local investors to invest in different activities, not just industrial, agricultural, services sector, and so on, because Egypt has a diversified economic base. And this explains why the government was, before the announcement of the liberalization of the exchange rate regime and the budget and how they are going to cure the excessive budget deficit by lowering the subsidy bill and so on. They mentioned that there are incentives for investment, whether in remote areas or in non-traditional sectors in industry or in the economy, to encourage export-oriented activities. All this shows that the government is aware of the bigger picture of how things should be.
Right.
We would ask that these efforts would be successful and the government would be able to inject more capital outlays in the economy in the shorter run.
Well, let me get a closing statement from Engineer Mudhhat and ask you, obviously, how important is this IMF loan to Egypt? And how will it help improve the economy and make it more attractive to foreign investors?
Of course, the IMF loan is a certificate to the Egyptian economy that it is on the right track. But this is not enough. It's also how we are going to utilize these loans. And it will be a big mistake if we just use it in order to close the budget deficit.
Right.
This is something that has to be invested, it has to have a return, and showing the investment community all over the world that we are optimizing the use of the available resources.
Right.
This will foster as well and reinforce the trust in the Egyptian economy and on the capability of the administration in dealing with this. But also, on the other hand, all what happened will have an impact, negative impact as well on the business community. And this is something has to be considered from the government. As an example, I'm expecting that the first impact will be that the taxation, let's say, the taxation, let's say,
system, that new taxes will be
not the
applied?
taxation system, that the tax is collected. I mean, it will decrease.
Right.
Because a lot of companies will gain losses because of this, let's say, re-evaluation for especially the hard currency loans, which will swallow whatever profits have been, let us say, resulted or whatever. This is one thing. On the other hand, in order for them to become financially accepted from the banking system to finance their extensions or their operation or whatever, they have to again revalue or their assets.
Right. Thank you very much, Engineer Mudhhat Issteifanos, member of the General Federation of Egyptian Industries, Dr. Ala Eshazli, Professor of Economics at Cairo University. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. A very good night to all of you. Thank you.